Good morning. Boker Tov Rabotai. It is Tedvav Besivan, the 15th of Sivan, June 4th, Sunday, June 4th. We are holding in the Dirshu Daf Yomi Behalacha, the Amud Yomi at the bottom of Chaf Aleph, Amud Aleph. We're going to be doing primarily today Chaf Aleph Amud Bet, starting at the bottom of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, Siman Kuf Lametet, Seder Kriyat HaTorah Ubirchoteha. In those places where the minhag, that the person who is called up for the aliyah, he is the person who reads the aliyah, he is the person who is koreh b'Torah. Im lo sider tehila haparasha pa'amayim v'shalosh beno leben atzmo lo ya'aleh. If he did not prepare the parasha at least 2 or 3 times, if he did not review it between him and himself, if he did not review it at least 2 or 3 times, in other words, if he is not prepared, lo ya'aleh, he may not go up. At the minimum, a person who is koreh b'Torah, he has to review it at least 2 or 3 times. Ubemakom shehazan koreh hu tzarich lesader tahila. And in a place where it's the hazan, where the Bet Knesset has a Baal Koreh who does the Kriyat Torah, who reads the Kriyat Torah, it's not those who are called up, but rather it is a Baal Koreh. He certainly has to prepare the Kriyah before he reads the Torah for the Tzibur. Let's look in the Mishnah Brura. Lo ya'aleh, hainu, af al pi shekara'uhu la'alot. In a place where the minhag is, where the person who's called up to the Torah, he's the one who reads his aliyah. Even if they called him up to the Torah, he should not go up if he's not prepared to read. V'amru Hazal, shlosha devarim mekatrim yamav shel adam. 3 things shorten the days of a person's life. Ve'echad mehen mi shenotnim lo sefer Torah likrot ve'eno koreh. One of them is if a person is given to read in a Sefer Torah and he doesn't read. In other words, he's given a Kriyah and he doesn't read. Hacha lo ya'aleh. In our situation, though, even though this is one of the situations, this is one of the scenarios which shortens a person's life. However, in our scenario, hacha lo ya'aleh. He shouldn't go up if he's called up. Shetzarich mitahila lesader beno leben atzmo. First, he has to prepare the reading. V'asmechuhu hachamim akra dichtiv az ra'a vaisapera hechina v'gam hakara. There's a they find support to this halacha that even if a person is called up to the Torah, and the minhag is that the person who's called up, he is the one who reads his own aliyah. If he is not prepared, he should not go up. They found a pasuk in support of this halacha. This pasuk is in Iyov, Az ra'a vaisapera hechina v'gam hakara. Let's go to Seif Bet in Maran HaShulchan Aruch. Mi she'eno yodea likrot. Someone who does not know how to read. Tzarich limchot biyado shelo ya'aleh lasefer Torah. You need to protest. He may not go up for an aliyah to the Sefer Torah. Ve'im tzrichim lazeh. If they need him to go up. Ve'im tzrichim lazeh she'eno yodea likrot. If they need the person who doesn't know how to read, if they need to give him an aliyah, what does it mean they need to give him an aliyah? What would be the case that you have to give an aliyah to a person who doesn't know how to read? Lefi shehu kohen or levi ve'en sham achar zulato. Either he's a kohen or a levi, and there's nobody else there that's a kohen or a levi. Im kesheyikra lo sheliach tzibur mila b'mila yodea le'omra. If when the Shaliach Tzibur reads word by word, he knows how to say it. Yodea le'omra v'likrota min haketab yachol la'alot. If this is a person that does not know how to read, however, if the Shaliach reads word for word, he can repeat after him. He can repeat after him. He can look in the Sefer Torah, see the writing and repeat after him. Yachol la'alot. In such a case, even though he doesn't know how to read, however, once again, if he can repeat word for word what the Shaliach Tzibur is saying and read it from the writing, he may go up. Ve'im lav lo ya'aleh. However, if he can't even do that, if he doesn't even possess the skill to repeat word for word what the Baal Koreh is reading, and he cannot read it off the writing, he may not go up. Let's see Seif Katan Bet in the Mishnah Brura. Hu tzarich Ubedi avad im en sham. I'm going to go back to Seif Aleph now. I'm in the Mishnah Brura Seif Katan Bet, Seif Aleph in the Shulchan Aruch. Mishnah Brura Seif Katan Bet. Hu tzarich v'chulu ubedi avad im en sham bebet knesset mi shesider le'atzmo mitahila. Bedi avad. If we have a situation where no one is prepared to read the Sefer Torah, no one prepared the Kriyah, what do? כדי שלא לבטל קריאה בציבור נוהגים להקל שיקרא אחד שיודע לנגן הטעמים אף על פי שלא סידר. The minhag is, when we don't have anybody who prepared the kriyah, we call up a person who knows who knows the te'amim. He can read the kriyah with the te'amim, even though he didn't prepare. Vekor'in lefanav belahash mitoch hachumash o hasidur. We read from a chumash or a sidur, and he hears it and he reads it with the te'amim. V'ayin lekaman b'siman kuf me'bet b'mishnah brura ma shenichtov bazeh. Techila ומצווה מן המובחר שגם העולה יסדר תחילה בינו לבין עצמו. Even in the case when you have a Baal Koreh, you have a Hazan who's reading the Torah, still there is a responsibility. It is a mitzvah min hamuvhar on the ole, on the person who's called up for the Kriyat Torah, that he should prepare the Kriyah. In other words, it doesn't matter, or it shouldn't have any bearing, that the Baal Koreh is prepared. Even the person who gets the aliyah, and he's relying, and we are all relying on the Baal Koreh to read, he also should be prepared. ובשניים מקרא שקרא בערב שבת יוצא כי נחשב בחשבון הסידור. How can he be prepared? Well, what can we do? What can he do to be prepared? It's enough if he did שניים מקרא ואחד תרגום. That's considered that he reviewed the aliyah, and that's enough for him to go up to the Torah. That is called mitzvah מן המובחר. שגם העולה יסדר תחילה לבינו לבין עצמו, as long as he did שניים מקרא ואחד תרגום. ב' צריך למחות, מתוך דברי המחבר מוכח, from מרן השולחן ערוך, it seems, it appears, דאפילו אם יכול לקרות עם השליח ציבור מילה במילה מתוך הכתב, גם כן אין לקרותו. Even from מרן השולחן ערוך, if we read the words of the Shulchan Aruch clearly, when we're not talking about a situation, when we are not talking about a situation where we need to call him up, for example, a Kohen or a Levi, even if he knows how to read, even in a case, not that he knows how to read, but he can read with the Shaliach Tzibur word for word, mitoch haketav, gam ken en likroto, we shouldn't call him up. Why? Because we have the option to call somebody else. When do we rely that a person can't read, but he can read word for word when the Shaliach Tzibur is reading it, he can read word for word from the Kitab, from the writing, that's when we don't have a choice but to call him up. We need him either as a Kohen or a Levi. However, when we do have a choice to call somebody else up, we may not rely on the fact that he can, excuse me, that he can repeat the words, that he can read word for word with the Shaliach Tzibur from the writing. אבל מדברי הטור לקמן בסימן קמ"א וכן מתשובת הראש שהובא שם בבית יוסף, משמע דייש להקל בזה. Further on, it seems from the Tur and the Tshuvat HaRosh that it's brought in the Bet Yosef that we can be lenient. ובפרט לפי מה שכתב בסעיף ג' בשם מהריל בוודאי אין להחמיר בזה. That's the Mishnah Brura. I would like to read from the Halacha Brura for a moment on this Halacha. להלן יתבאר שהעולה לתורה צריך לקרוא בלחש עם השליח ציבור. The Halacha that we will see in Siman Kuf Mem Aleph, that when a person gets an Aliyah LaTorah, he has to read, not only does the Baal Koreh have to read it for him and the entire Kahal, but he reads it quietly. He whispers it that no one should be able to hear it. He too has a responsibility to read the Torah. However, he reads it quietly. If he does not read it quietly together with the Baal Koreh, with the Shaliach Tzibur, then the brachot he made by the Aliyah are bracha levatala. Now, umi she'eno yodea likro b'Torah klal. Somebody who doesn't know how to read the Torah at all. אבל כשהשליח ציבור קורא בקול רם, יודע הוא לקרוא אחריו מילה במילה כראוי. However, when the shaliach tzibur reads it out loud, he can follow him and he can read it word for word with the shaliach tzibur. והוא מכיר צורת האותיות. And he recognizes the shapes of the letters. He can identify the letters of the Aleph Bet של לשון הקודש. In this case, as long as he recognizes the letters, he knows the letters of the Aleph Bet, Gimel, Dalet, etc. And when the Shaliach Tzibur reads, even though he can't read, but he possesses enough skill that he can read word for word with the Shaliach Tzibur, in that case, he may be even called up lechatchila. If he does not recognize the letters of the Aleph Bet, אבל יודע לחזור מילה במילה אחר השליח ציבור הקורא בתורה בלא שיקרא מתוך הספר, לדעת מרן השולחן ערוך אינו רשאי לעלות לתורה. If he can follow word for word, but he doesn't recognize the letters, he doesn't know the letters, he doesn't know that what's an Aleph, what's a Bet, what's a Gimel, even if he can follow word for word without reading from writing, according to Maran HaShulchan Aruch, he is not allowed to get an aliyah. This should be the minhag in a place where it's not clear that you're allowed to be, where there is no clear minhag, no clear custom to be lenient. And certainly in a place where this is the minhag, that they don't call up such a person, that even though he can repeat the words after the shaliach tzibur, but he does not recognize the letters, we are not allowed to be lenient in such a case. If he already got the aliyah, we do not ask him to step down in order not to embarrass him. Ulam, במקומות שנהגו להקל לעלות לתורה מי שאינו יודע צורת האותיות, רשאים לסמוך על מנהגם אפילו לכתחילה. Even in those אולם במקום שנהגו להקל להעלות לתורה מי שאינו יודע צורת האותיות, in those places that have a minhag to give an aliyah Torah to someone who doesn't even recognize the letters. He was never taught the Aleph Bet. He can repeat after the Shaliach Tzibur, after the Hazan, but he was never taught the Aleph Bet. They can rely on this minhag lechatechila. ויש מקומות שנהגו להקל להעלות עם הארץ לתורה אפילו אינו יודע לחזור ולקרוא אחר השליח ציבור. There are those places where their custom, their minhag is that they are lenient, that they even call up an am ha'aretz, an ignoramus, that doesn't even know how to read or even to repeat the words after the shaliach tzibur. Umikol makom, however, nachon leachmir sheyosifu al minyan ha'olim be'ofen sheyu shiva olim sheyodim likro mila b'mila achar ha'shaliach tzibur. In such a case, if an am ha'aretz is getting an aliyah Torah where he can't even repeat the words of the shaliach tzibur, then in that case it is proper that you add on an aliyah, and you have a minimum of 7 people that at the minimum they can read word for word together with the shaliach tzibur. V'im efshar hadavar v'lo yavo lidei machloket, and also if it's possible and it won't bring to any strife, to any argument, nachon שיחזור השליח ציבור הקורא בתורה על אותם פסוקים שקרא אותו עם הארץ שאינו יודע צורת האותיות. If an am haaretz was given an aliyah, if it's possible and it will not lead to any strife or argument, by the next oleh The Hazan, the Baal Koreh, should repeat the Pesukim that he read by the Am Haaretz, who cannot even repeat word for word with the Hazan. By the next Aliyah, the Hazan or the Baal Koreh, should repeat the Pesukim of that Aliyah, and then start of the previous Aliyah, and then start the new Aliyah. Let's go now to Mishnah Brura. Hey. Lo ya'aleh lefi she'asur likrot afilu ot achat shelo min haketav. Why may we not give a person who's not able to read word for word from the ketav, from the writing, why may we not give him an aliyah? Lefi she'asur likrot afilu ot achat shelo min haketav. You're not allowed to read the Torah. Everything you read from the Torah has to be directly from the Torah. You can't read one word that's not from the writing. Our minhag, the Mishnah Brura writes, our minhag is to be lenient, and we also just brought down, and this is aside from what we just brought down in the Halacha Brura. Gimel, afilu Rosh HaKnesset, even the head of a Bet Knesset, or Hazan, lo yikra ad she'emru lo kera. He may not begin to read the Torah until he has permission to read from the Torah. And the minhag is that the Baal Koreh, he's allowed to take an aliyah, he's allowed to make a bracha of an aliyah, he can take an aliyah even without asking permission. Mishum dehave ki'ilu mish'ah sheminuhu l'shliach tzibur hirshuhu al kach. Why? Why doesn't he have to ask permission? Because we consider it that once we appointed him as the Shaliach Tzibur, as the Baal Koreh, therefore, Hirshuhu al kach, he has permission to take an aliyah. Haga, ubemedinot elu en nohagin ken. In these countries, the Rama writes, in these countries, this is not the minhag. Ve'en hazan ole rak she'asigan omer lo la'alot. The hazan may only go up, he may only take an aliyah, the Baal Koreh may only take an aliyah if he's given permission to take an aliyah. אבל אין קוראים לו בשמו כמו שאר העולים שקוראים אותם בשמם פלוני בר פלוני. However, if and when he is given an aliyah, we don't call him up by his name. ומי שאביו מומר לעבודת כוכבים, קוראים אותו בשם אבי אביו. And someone whose father is an apostate, someone whose father is an idol worshiper, we call him but we don't use his father's name, we use his grandfather's name. Avalo bishmo levad shelo levasho barabim. But we don't call him up by his name alone in order not to embarrass him publicly. Rather, instead of calling him up by his father's name, his name Ploni ben Ploni, we call him up by his grandfather's name. We use his grandfather's name instead of his father's name. V'davka shelo ala miyamav b'shem aviv. This is all talking about in a case that he never got an aliyah with his father's name. Aval imhu gadol, if he's already older, v'hugal be'ota, he's already a gadol. V'hugal be'ota ir lalot b'shem aviv, and whenever they called him up to the Torah, they always called him up by his father's name, Ploni ben Ploni. They always used his father's name. They used his name, the son of his father. Vehemir aviv, and his father became an idol worshipper. Vehemir aviv lavodat kochavim, korim oto b'shem aviv kemo shehu gal. If they always called him up by his father's name, then they continue to call him up by his father's name. Shelo levayesho barabim, in order not to publicly embarrass him. V'chen im ika, v'chen, and similarly, im ika lemechash le'evat hamumar, if we're afraid by not calling him up by his father's name, his father became an avodat kochavim, he became an idol worshipper, he began to believe in idol worshipping. And we also allowed to use his father's name when calling him up if there's going to be a backlash, if there's going to be some kind of retribution from the father, from the idol worshiper, if we don't. Va'asufi a child who was gathered from the marketplace, who doesn't know who his father or mother, who doesn't know who his father and mother are. Ushtuki, or someone that knows who his mother is or not his father. Korin oto beshem avi imo. We call them by their maternal grandfather, by the grandfather from the mother's side. V'im eno yadua, and if v'im eno yadua, and even if that's not known, korin oto beshem Avraham kemo lager. So we use the term, we call him up by the name of, we call him up the son of Avraham Avinu, like when we call up a ger. Gimel. In the Mishnah Brura, Gimel Seif Katan Vav. Afilu Rosh HaKnesset v'chulu v'kol sheken Adam de'alma. All the more so a regular person, not only a Rosh Knesset, even a regular person. Everybody has to have permission before going up. V'hata'am she'en ra'u sheyahalok Adam kavod le'atzmo. It is not proper for a person to honor himself and give himself an aliyah. A person has to be called up. Ve'od delo lete le'insuye shekol echad yakdim atzmo. Also, what's going to happen is there's going to be chaos, that each person is going to want to go up. Each person is going to want to go first. In any case, a person has to be called up. A person has to have permission to go up, may not give himself an aliyah. Even the Rosh Bet Knesset. Mishum dehave. Shi'ur halashon kenhu. Mishum dehave ki'ilu hirshuhu al kach misha sheminuhu l'shaliyach tzibur. Why is it when the Maran HaShulchan Aruch writes that a Hazan can give himself an aliyah? How does that work? Because when they appointed him, when they gave him permission to be Shaliach Tzibur, that comes with the permission that he can have an aliyah. ובבית יוסף מבואר יותר, דכיוון דרשם נוהגים ששליח ציבור הוא הקורא במקום העולים. Since the minhag today is that the Shaliach Tzibur reads instead of the olim, im ken כיוון שהרשו להיות שליח ציבור, הרי הרשו לקרוא בתורה. Since they appointed him as Shaliach Tzibur, since they gave him permission to be Shaliach Tzibur, they also gave him permission to read from the Torah. Umistame lo kapte im yivarer gam ken. We can assume that they will not be strict, they will not be rigid if he also takes an aliyah. After the fact that in any case he is the Baal Koreh. En korin lo bishmo, we don't give a hazan, we don't call him up by name. Kevan shehu omed sham, he's already there. Shelo levayesho barabim, umikol makom, in a case where a person's father is an idol worshiper, we never just call him up by name. Umikol makom, why? Because this will embarrass him. If we're calling everybody up by their name and their father's name, and then this person, his father's an idol worshiper, and we only call him up by name and not his father's name, that will be embarrassing. Therefore, if we don't have a choice, we do call him up by his name and his father's name. Or excuse me, we never call up a person only by their name. We always try to find a solution, either by their grandfather, but we don't just call a person up by his name. Umikol makom lo yomar te'arim al aviv. However, we don't give his father, we don't give his father any titles. Kemo haver o morenu, kien lomar sheker. A person we shouldn't lie. Rak yomar b'chipazon livli yargishu ha'am. Rather, we should say his father's name very quickly. V'davka be'ota ha'ir, and specifically in that city, kemo shekatav Rama. Aval im ba le'id acheret, if he comes to a different city, v'sho'el oto ha'segan ech nikra laTorah, and he is asked, how should we give you an aliyah laTorah? Yomar Shem Avi Aviv. In that case, when he comes to a different city, so to speak, when he's starting new, when he goes to a different city and nobody knows him, in that case, he should just tell them his grandfather's name. He should tell them his name and his grandfather's name. Beshem Avi Imo. We said in the Rama, Va'asufi ushtuki korin otam beshem avi imo. A person who has gathered from the marketplace and does not know who his parents are, or a person who knows only who his mother is, we call him up to the Torah by his maternal grandfather. Umayri shebat ahad kodem shene'esaf min hashuk ve'amra shehi imo. We're talking about a case that before he was gathered from the marketplace, a woman came forward and said, I'm his mother. According to the Taz, he should be called up Beshem, the son of Avraham Avinu. In a case of a child who's gathered from the marketplace, or a person who only knows their mother's name, even though the Rama writes that he should be called up by his grandfather, his name, the son of his grandfather, the Taz argues, and the Hayye Adam also argues that no, that in that case he should be the son of Avraham Avinu when he's called up. Ve'im eno yadua shem avi imo korin oto b'shem ben Avraham al shem hakatuv ki av hamon goim netaticha. If we don't even know the name of the grandfather, if we don't know the name of the mother's grandfather, the mother's father, this person's grandfather, then we just call him up as ben Avraham. De'achshav kore suma. Let's go back into Maran HaShulchan Aruch. Suma eno kore lefi she'asur likrot afilu ot ahat shelo min haketav. Are you allowed to give a blind person an aliyah Torah? According to Maran HaShulchan Aruch, asur, because you're not allowed to read even one letter not from the writing. Umaril katav de'achshav kore suma kemo shanu makir b'Torah le'am ha'aretz. The Maharil writes that today the minhag is that even we give a blind person an aliyah, the same way we call up an am ha'aretz. V'ta'amo, in the Mishnah Brura, the keman shanu nohagin she'ashaliach tzibur kore vehu kore mitoch haketav. Since in any case the minhag is that the shaliach tzibur, he's the one who reads, he's the Baal Koreh. Vehu kore mitoch haketav, and he's reading directly from the writing. Shuv lo kaptinan al haoleh deshomea ke'oneh. We're no longer strict. We're no longer so strict on the oleh, on the person who's called up, because in any case the shaliach tzibur, he's the one who's reading, and he's reading from the ketav, because we have a principle, we have a rule, deshomea ke'oneh. Kemo she'anu rotze lomar she'anu nohagin lehakel afilu im eno yachol likrot im hashaliach tzibur mila b'mila mitoch haketav. We are lenient, since we are lenient even in a case when the person cannot read word for word with the shaliach tzibur from the ketav, from the writing, since we are lenient in that case, val kochach mitam hanal vehu hadin besuma. If we are lenient in a case, according to the Mishnah Brura, he writes, if we are lenient to give an aliyah Torah to a person who's not even able to read word for word with the Hazan, with the Baal Koreh, certainly we can also be, the same is true with the blind person. Lehalacha, we are lenient like the Maharil, that you can give a blind person an aliyah. Umikol makom parashat para parashat zachor nachon shelo likol lecha techila. For parashat para and parashat zachor, it's proper not to give a blind person an aliyah. Let's go. I want to read what the halacha brura has to say on aliyah Torah for a suma. Ledat Maran HaShulchan Aruch en hasuma rashay la'alot laTorah va'afilu yodea lachzor mila b'mila achar kriyat hashaliach hatzibur. According to Maran HaShulchan Aruch, you are not allowed to give a blind person an aliyah Torah even if he can repeat word for word from the shaliach tzibur. וכן יש לנהוג במקום שאין מנהג ברור להקל, וכל שכן במקום שנהגו להחמיר שאינם רשאים לשנות המנהג. This is supposed to be the minhag where there is no, if in a place, in a Bet Knesset, there is no clear minhag to be lenient, then the opinion of Maran HaShulchan has to be followed. And certainly, where there is no minhag to be lenient, when there is no minhag at all, we should be machmir. However, if a blind person was already called up to the Torah, en moridim oto, we do not ask him to step down, in order not to embarrass him. Ulam, however, berov hamekomot nahagu lehakel leha'alot suma laTorah. Notwithstanding what Maran HaShulchan Aruch wrote, the minhag in the majority of places is that we are lenient to give a blind person an aliyah. V'rasha'im lismoch al minhagam afilu lechatchila. They can rely on their minhag even lechatchila. V'nachon lehachmir sheyosifu al minyan ha'olim be'ofen shehu shiva olim sheyodim likro mila b'mila achar ha'shaliyat tzibur milevad hasuma. It is, however, it is proper to be stringent, to add an extra aliyah in order that there's 7 aliyot. We're obviously talking about Shabbat now. In order that there are 7 aliyot of people who know how to read at minimally, who know how to read word for word with the shaliach tzibur, aside for the blind person. ואם אפשר הדבר ולא יבוא לידי מחלוקת, נכון שיחזור שליח ציבור הקורא בתורה על אותם פסוקים שקרא הסומה. And if it's possible, and there will be no machloket, when the shaliach tzibur, the Baal Koreh, reads the next aliyah, he should repeat the pesukim that were read by the aliyah of the blind person. In other words, when he starts the next aliyah, he should not start it from where he ended by the aliyah of the blind person. Rather, he should start it from the beginning where he started originally by the aliyah of the blind person. He should go back to that point and he should continue from there. Bezrat Hashem Rabotai. Tomorrow we will continue with Seif Daled.